Well, welcome again, everybody. I'm Leslie Burkus, the Executive Director of the Urban and Community Forestry Society. We're really happy to have you here for this month's learning series. And it's a really exciting topic, thinking about AI, LiDAR, how do we manage our trees in a smart way, which you were always doing, but how do we do this with computer-aided technology? So we'll go through that here with Josh. And before we do, again, an introduction to the Urban and Community Forestry Society, or UCFS as we go by. First, I want to thank our exclusive learning series partner, Bartlett Tree Experts. Together with Bartlett, we share the goal of raising the bar for urban forestry, and that means making sure that you have the knowledge that you need to do your jobs to the best of your ability. So we thank Bartlett for their continued support. And overall, we thank all of our sponsors and members. Davie Resource Group is a sponsor, as well as EOCene, and of course, members who are part of the society. You as a member help make this work possible. We help bring you together. We want to make sure you feel you're most confident in your daily tree care decisions. So if you're a member, thank you so much. If you're not a member, we hope that you'll join when the time is right. So for today, we're starting off with an introduction to UCFS. I'm going to kick it over to Josh Bohanek, who will talk about the role of AI and LiDAR in machine learning and tree inventories. How you help assess those power or AI powered tools for data accuracy and your maintenance work, and strategies to implement to start these smart tree inventories. So if you ever wondered, what does this mean for my community? We're going to find out today. We'll end with Q&A. We'll have time to ask your questions of Josh, but if you want to use the Q&A app within this Teams, you can write your question in there and we can answer it or bring it up with Josh at the end. If chat's easier for you as well, you can do that, but Q&A might be the best way to keep your questions organized for us to answer. And at the end, we will drop the CEU credential form for you. As we're getting started here, we'd love for you to drop your name and where you're from in the chat. It's always so much fun to see where people are joining us from across the globe. So let us know where you're calling in from. This webinar is being recorded and will be made available to you afterwards. ISA CEUs are approved for this. We will give you the form at the end of this, and we will submit those on your behalf. And you all are on mute, and we'll bring you off mute if you'd like to ask a question at the end. So the Urban and Community Forestry Society, what do we do? What is our mission? Our mission is to build a confidence, competence, and camaraderie of all professionals who manage trees and forests to create and sustain more livable communities. So a mouthful, but if we really break that down, we are the professional membership home for the people who make or support daily tree care decisions. If you decide who, what, where, when, or how a tree decision is made, goes in the ground, a tree comes out, goes in, is managed in some way, you are supporting people who do that, you belong in this membership society. Just like doctors, nurses, lawyers have membership societies that help make them better at their work and speak on their behalf, you as an urban forester get to have that here with UCFS. So that's our role. We take it very seriously to make sure that you are able to do your job to the best of your ability. And we do that in a number of different ways. We have our City Trees publication that we put out to help you get information about urban forestry. It's a great resource to share with stakeholders, maybe your boss who's like, what is this tree person doing? It'd be a great thing to share with them so they know more about your work. We have an arborist exchange program that's a members only benefit, mentorship, our annual conference, and monthly learning series like this, all in an effort to help make sure you have the best information at your fingertips to make those big tree decisions. Coming up later this year is our annual conference being held November 17th through the 18th in Henderson, Nevada. Right now, we're asking for calls for proposals and they close on May 15th. So we'd love to have your ideas. Overall, we're trying to find out what works and what doesn't in urban forestry. So if you've got a horror story and something you learned from it, we want to hear it because those are really important things to learn from as well. And of course, your big successes we want to hear as well. So check out that call for proposals and we'd love to see one of yours there for consideration for November. An exclusive membership benefit is our membership hub. This is a place that you can log in and connect with people from across the world, ask them questions, find a mentor, join a group that you might want to ask more questions of someone specific. So if you are a member, make sure you're logging into the membership hub. And if you're not, join us and you can have access to it. Coming up later this year or in the next couple months in June from Bartlett, we'll have an RFP writing a workshop where we'll talk more about what it means to write and get well-prepared RFPs so that you can get the best results from it and what does it mean to respond to those. We will have our second of our Career Compass series where we'll talk about after you land the job, what do you do now? That's especially targeted to young and emerging professionals. In July, we'll have that announced soon, but in August, we'll have National Tree Canopy Assessment Tool that's been launched to find out more about how you could be using that tool to assess the canopy you have now. So it's available now. Let's talk it through more and see what it means to use it. Finally, thank you again. We really appreciate the members who are here. If you're not, I hope that you'll join when you feel like it's ready, and we welcome you at any time. Thank you to our members. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing. And Josh, I'm going to turn it over to you.
All right. Thank you, Leslie. It's so great to see so many friends on those shots you were just showing. Can you see my screen and hear me okay?
Yes.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody, for being here. It's always exciting to participate with UCFS. So I'm going to get right into it. Like Leslie said, going to be talking to you guys about smart tree management. And but here's what I'm going to be going over as that relates. We'll be overlaying kind of what it is, and then I'll be talking about some case studies as it relates to it. So let's get into it. All right. I do want to point you towards this QR code that is on there. If you want to use your phone, you can actually pull up a copy of today's presentation and download it as well. So you can follow along if that helps. I do have the QR code at the last slide as well, so that you can decide and wait and maybe determine if it's worth it to you to download or not and share. So smart tree management. This is a natural extension of what we've been doing with our smart tree inventories alongside our technology partner, Greenhill. So we've been working on those for the last couple of years. A lot of people know about that. So this smart tree management, again, working with our partner Greenhill, is the natural extension of that. And I think it would be helpful is as we go through this presentation for the next about 30, 45 minutes, we all have our mind in the same headspace. So to do that, I'd like you all to kind of just visualize and think and compare our urban forestry programs similar to our personal health and our personal wellness journeys that we have. And why do I do that? Because I think of our urban forest a lot like that when we're managing trees. A lot of times we're the doctors. And, do we want our patients that we're evaluating our trees, do we want to either, wait for the issue to arise and react to that issue in isolation and not do any kind of follow-up? Or do we want to think about it as what our primary care physicians would say is, to do the preventative visit, monitor issues within the context of your whole body, and then do the appropriate follow-up. So if you kind of have that in your mind today, I think that will help you understand why we're talking about smart tree management and why we want to move from what we're calling this guess, act, pray, the type of management, to a more assess, prioritize, and act type of management. So with this, I think what we're trying to do is to make the right decision on the right tree at the right time, which again is no different than what our primary care physicians are doing with us when they're trying to make the right decision on the right issue at the right time. So I think about how to set this up as urban foresters, city foresters, community foresters, whatever you want to call yourself. When you walk up to a tree at any given time, you are thinking, should I remove this tree? Should I prune this tree? Or should I monitor this tree? Those are kind of the three options that you're presented with. The hardest thing about that is you have to think about, when am I going to return to this tree? And in absence of that, that really affects your decision process on those three options that you have. So that's what today is all about, is helping us, again, make that right decision on the right tree at the right time, and really putting context into that return visit. So in order to do that, I'd like to launch a poll question here that I think is going to be launched. And I really want to understand, as you think about your pruning cycles or your ideal pruning cycle, what are you trying to accomplish out there? Is it every 5 years? Is it every 5 to 10 years? Is it 10 to 20 years, or is it more than 20 years? So hopefully people will be answering those.
Josh, it's in the chat. If it's not showing up, you can see the responses coming in.
Great. So we'll leave that open for a couple more seconds. And I'm going to go ahead and close it down. And it looks like the average is about that 5 to 10. 50% are trying to shoot for a 5 to 10 year cycle. Some are trying to go as less than 5 years. All right, thank you. That was helpful for me to understand, because I think that sets up what we've been thinking as well. So when I think about the current way, and we're thinking about our analogy with our human checkups, this kind of style of guessing that we're at the right tree, making a decision, and then hoping that was the right decision. And moving that to this more of, let's do a true assessment, and then let's prioritize the work that we need to look at. Let's act on that work, and then let's learn from that and reassess. So one key element I want to point out is this is a very open feedback loop system where you don't really get feedback on if your decisions were the right ones or not. Moving to a closed feedback loop, which really demonstrates if you're making the right one. And then I want to introduce the idea of KPIs. I would ask you to think about, what are your key communities KPIs? And which one of those are lagging indicators of a good, healthy urban forest versus leading indicators of a good, healthy urban forest? How do you create, share, and report on those? And whenever you are asked to make a budget modification, do you report on the potential effect for those for KPIs? So what I would like to introduce here is the idea that with a smart tree management program, we can show that we can reduce the risk to the urban forest and our community members by upwards of 80%, by reducing 311 calls, by reducing storm response time, and reducing tree-related judgments and payouts, amongst other elements to the urban forest. We can improve the maintenance cost efficiency of pruning by doing better preventative maintenance and getting better tree planting establishment and survival and selection process. And then we can also increase the lifetime asset of our assets, which will allow us to have more ecosystem services and reducing the removal of trees too preventatively. All right, so we know that the majority of people, let's launch this last poll question real fast. The majority of people, 50% are trying to achieve a 5 to 10 year pruning cycle. So I'm curious how up to date your tree inventory is as you relate to when you're making those decisions. Is it less than 5 years old? Are you keeping it up to date every day? Are you pretty confident in it? Is it older than that, 5 to 10, 10 to 20, more than 20, or something else maybe doesn't exist? So let's see how these results are coming in. Leave that open for a couple seconds. All right, looks like everybody's figuring this out. Leslie, thank you for entertaining me. All right, let's go ahead and close it. And I'm very excited to see that 50% of the people here have an inventory that's less than 5 years, and then it goes down to 5 to 10 years, then 10 to 20. Nobody has one more than 20 years. I find that a little surprising, but that's exciting. Okay, so what do we know? Why do we bring that up? We know that the climate is changing at unexpected and faster rates than we think, and it's not just the weather. It's political climate, it's funding climate, it's all sorts of pressures on our urban forest that our trees did not evolve with. And we also know that if you look on the right-hand side of your screen, this is a research project we did where we correlated the 311 calls that come in compared to the actual maintenance of the trees that needed to happen. And we can see that there's really no correlation between people calling in and people, the work that actually needs to happen. In fact, based off of some research we did with our Treekeeper client database, 80% of the clients that have our Treekeeper system connected into their 311 logs, call logs, we can see that 80% of the requests that come in result in no tree work being needed. And several of you have probably heard me say this before, but I don't think as we think about technology, we need to worry about it replacing us. But I do say that arborists or foresters that use technology will replace arborists who do not. So when I think about technology, I think about the adoption of chainsaws, I think about the adoption of smartphones. This is just the adoption of GIS. This AI, machine learning, LiDAR is the next evolution in that process. So I encourage you to kind of think about it in that context as well. All right, so let's dive a little bit more into the what a smart tree management program really is. So I'm going to take this into 3 parts that it consists of: the assess, prioritize, and act, and just briefly go into each one of them. So when we think about the assess part, I'm thinking about, okay, how do I make the right decision on this tree? Well, in order to do that, you need to think about your current budget, your current program. You have to think about what the accuracy and the results of your tree inventory are. And probably more importantly, you need to think about this tree in the context of all the other trees that are out there. If we're only thinking about it in the bubble, then you could be walking past or driving past trees that really need your attention just for this one tree that has been reactively brought to our attention. So when we're working with people to think about how to assess their current programs, we're asking them to take a deep second and think about how much are you spending on key categories as it relates to your current budget, and then how much of that is and how much work is actually be happening as it relates to in-house versus contracted work. So that has to be part of your assessments, especially when you're thinking about trying to set your KPIs, right? And which ones of these are leading or lagging indicators, and how will that budget modifications be affected by it? Another critical piece to the element of the smart tree management assessment process is the ability to create a digital twin. So again, these are those smart tree inventories that we've been working with Greenhill on for the past couple of years. And we, using ground-based LiDAR and high-resolution imagery, we're able to drive streets and go into parks and create a digital twin of the trees, a digital twin of the whole urban forest. And then we have the supercomputers fly through the data and identify the trees within that information. And then extracting those trees, we're able to isolate them and pull out critical information that people need, as well as advanced information that you also need. And I want to spend a little bit of time on this to think about the ability to do what we call it cohort analysis, and then to monitor change over time. So when we think about a cohort analysis, what we're doing is we're taking trees of the same species or similar species that are in the same or similar diameter or size, and we're putting them together, and we're looking at those trees to determine and find outliers within them. So those trees can help us identify if a tree is declining or growing, or for whatever reason is performing differently than the rest of them. So it's an objective way to think about the performance of our urban forest relative to other trees in your urban forest. And it's not a subjective assessment based off of somebody's opinion of what they think a tree should look like. And then the ability to monitor over time and change over time. I'm going to get into this a little bit more on later, but it's a critical piece to understand. If we go back to my example of looking and talking to your primary care physician, whenever an issue is identified, the first thing they want to do is look at your medical history. They want to see how much has it changed. And I'd like us to start thinking that way with our trees too, is how stable is this tree? And is it declining rapidly or not? Or is it growing rapidly or not? And that helps inform our decision process. So as we move on to prioritize, how do we prioritize that? Again, we need to prioritize it based off of these trees of concern, these outliers, how they're changing, and what our KPIs are. So I mentioned earlier what the cohort is, and here's an example of some of the elements that we use for outlier detection. And you can see here that what we're trying to do is any feature that can be objectively quantified and measured. So the tree height, the tree diameter, the canopy width, the leaf area, the crown volume is compared to all the other trees and which ones are way outside of the norm. So if we look at an area here, like this one, which has a big blob, it's going to be hard to find an outlier in that one. But ones that have more of an oval shape to them, and you can see there's more of a, you can see the trees that are on outside of those are the outliers. So those are the trees that, again, from a machine learning perspective, AI perspective, we don't know why, but we know something is different with these. And that's where the arborist needs to focus their attention and look at them. When we think about a kind of our traditional condition ratings, we're working on creating a new form of a condition rating that we're calling a vitality score. And again, using objective information, we can see, and within our cohorts, we're able to look at some of the elements to a tree to see how it's really performing. When we look back on, again, some of the information in our tree keeper systems on the amount of removals that happen in an urban forest, it's interesting. Over 70% of the trees that are removed are actually trees that are rated in fair or good condition. Less than about 18% are actually rated in poor or dead condition. The other ones are just don't have a condition rating or something. I find that really fascinating, as it's not a condition is not a very, it appears to not be a very good indicator on if a tree should be removed or not. When we think about monitoring the program, again, this is where we need to think about, okay, if I do make this recommendation for removal or pruning, what's the priority on it? How long, when does it need to happen? And what type of activity should happen? This answers that question of, when am I going to return to this tree? So if I make this decision on a 1-day time frame, that's a dramatically difference than you make it on an I don't know time frame, right? So now let's go through and look at what that kind of looks like. So here is a smart tree inventory from Pittsburgh that we've done. where we found an outlier and we want to look at this outlier tree, and we want to look at the digital twin alongside the photos and the street view imagery of it. And we're trying to see why this tree has performed differently than the other trees. It was flagged on 2 outlier reasons. Check out the tree without the leaves on. I'm going to look at the measurements of this tree just to get a sense of how big it is. I can see the diameter and the height. And this is all available in our web-based tree keeper software. So it doesn't take any special GIS skills. So here I can look at, we scanned this tree in 2023, and now we came back last year in 2024, and I can see how the 2023 scan compares to the 2024 scan. And then now I can look at how it's actually performing. So I can see that it's pretty stable, really. And if I want to go into my work order feature and create a work record or do a work inspection or see what's happened, I can do that as well. So that's a good example of how we think that using this technology can allow you to better monitor your trees and make the prioritization on what trees need to be pruned or removed. All right, so let's go into my final section here, a case study, kind of comparing the traditional tree inventory management approach to the smart tree inventory management approach, smart tree management. So traditionally, if we would do a normal kind of boots on the ground GIS-based inventory, we would take, a lot of times we would take that roll up of that data and we would put it into some sort of projected budget scenario. And then we would present that, and then the city would start working on it. So that's what this is an example of. This is a real numbers from our client in Las Vegas, Nevada. And looking at their traditional inventory that happened immediately prior to us doing a smart tree inventory, these are the results of what are currently housed in their tree keeper system. So they have about 1,100 trees recommended for removal. Oops, sorry. Can you see my cursor? No, okay. So they have about 1,100 trees recommended for removal, and this is how we would normally prioritize them. They have, this is if we were to try to do a 5-year proactive routine block side pruning program, this is what that would look like. So it's a pretty even distribution of all the trees based off of a 5-year pruning cycle. If we introduce a training pruning program, which would be on a 3-year cycle, that's what this represents here, the preventative maintenance piece. And then based off of the average inventory, if we were to do a monitoring of this, we would do an inventory in year 1, and then again an inventory in year 6 again after 5 years. And we would do, based off of the percentage of calls that come in off of our tree keeper clients, the assessments that come in with an average cost of usually about $50 an assessment for someone to go out and do those. That's what this number represents. And then the typical kind of planting here. And you can see if we look up at annual mortality, what I've done is taken the total numbers and divided that over the remaining years to give a kind of an average removal price. So what you're seeing in front of you now is kind of a traditional maintenance. And what we've seen over the years in doing these is that every time we do a traditional tree inventory approach and we find all these backlog of removals and prunes, that's what the city starts immediately trying to address, right? And trying to resolve that backlog. And unfortunately, it takes about 2 years for a community to get through that backlog, which then, while they're getting through that backlog, they start building backlogs on the rest of the urban forest, and their inventory starts getting out of date. So after about 3 years, or so, the inventory is kind of out of date-ish, and they don't know where their backlog is. So they start going back to a kind of a reactive maintenance program, and they're never able to really get up on the routine pruning program and any sort of confidence, right? And it's been surprising to see, looking at our TreeKeeper data, the amount of clients that still have about a 40% pruning rate on trees that are outside of a block-side pruning program, just from that kind of delayed reactionary pruning that's happened. So if we think about that on a 10-year program, so if we think about kind of a longer cycle of a tree program, this is what that pruning program trying to get to routine one starts to look like. Now the kicker here is that doesn't even calculate in or factor in any potential lawsuits or tree-related judgments that could happen to a community throughout that period. So I did some research here. We've done some research on what is some of the issues or some of the active lawsuits that have happened. And you can see that it's a very real thing that, our communities, if your assessments aren't good, or if you have an issue with your assessments, you're probably going to be brought into court. And these settlements can be huge. And we're looking at upwards in the mid-20s for some of them. As we know, it's probably only going to get worse, the amount of people that want them or want to do lawsuits, as well as the potential payouts for those. And unfortunately, whenever, I don't know how many people have been in a tree-related injury lawsuit issue, it really becomes, two words against each other. The plaintiff has an expert tree witness, the defendant has an expert tree witness, and it's a post-mortem analysis on what happened with the tree, who should have known what. There's never good documentation around photos or a digital twin or something that can really say why the decision was made to leave that tree, or to not prune or not remove that tree, or not inspect that tree. So that's really challenging, which is why you see these payments so big, because it's really challenging to make a defense for that. This is what I was talking about with tree-related judgments. So I won't beat this up anymore, but again, there is a QR code at the end if you want to download the presentation. So is my slides advancing now?
Yes, they are.
Okay, great. So now if we look at a smart tree inventory approach, smart tree management approach, what we're looking at is dramatically scaling back the amount of removals that need to happen, because we're going to do a biennial scan of the trees. So every 2 years, we're going to rescan and objectively look at it. And rather than looking at subjective condition ratings or maintenance recommendations, we're going to look at objective things like the measured percent dieback of a tree. And for every tree that has more than 75% dieback, we're going to remove those trees. Every tree that has a dieback between 25 and 75%, we're going to prune those trees. And then we're going to focus our preventative maintenance on trees that are under 12 inches that can actually be improved with the structural pruning of a tree. So you'll notice that what this means is that trees that are over 12 inches, and you could move that size to wherever you want, we're not going to try to do a block side pruning on those trees. We're going to let those trees do what they do. We're still about trees that have more than 3 outliers and less than 25% dieback. We're going to monitor those trees by looking at them on a semi-regular basis. So that's why there's the increase in cost on those. And then you'll see with the smart tree inventory, what we're doing is we're actually doing a biennial scan, but we're having it on an annual subscription model to the access to the information. So kind of a data as a service model there. So you're always getting accurate, high value, high accurate information. So what does that look like on a 10-year cycle? You can, you obviously will have a little bit of a backlog that you need to get through, but it's dramatically smaller. and then it will level out. So when we compare them side by side, you can see that a smart tree management program, not only does it check off your other KPIs of increasing asset lifespan, reducing 311 calls, reducing storm-related injuries or response, reducing plaintiff judgments, it also reduces your overall maintenance budget needs, and you have an updated inventory at all times. So let's look at, what do I mean? Like, okay, that's great, Josh. I don't believe you. I don't know what you're saying. So here again, looking at Las Vegas's tree keeper system, I searched out all the trees recommended for removal that are in poor condition, and I found this one Siberian elm tree that's somewhere between 19 to 24 inches, and that's what that maintenance would recommend. You know, we would go out and we'd remove that tree. But when I look at and compare it to the smart tree inventory, you'll notice that we're not assigning a condition rating to it, but it actually has a 0% dieback on it. So when I expand and look at the pictures of the tree, this is the latest updated pictures from that tree, and you can see that it doesn't have any dieback. I mean, it looks like it's in decent shape, right? So then when I look at the 3D twin of the tree, I can pull that up as well and have that at my fingertips, and I can scan around and see what the tree today looks like. If I had a previous inventory, I could see how it had changed over time. So again, this tree was probably recommended for removal, maybe because it was a Siberian elm, you know, or maybe because it had some dieback on it at the time, but someone came in and pruned it, and now it doesn't need to be, but it wasn't updated. Irregardless, I think we could all agree that right now it doesn't need to be removed, and the inventory wasn't accurate, and the maintenance budgets projected for it wasn't as accurate as it could have been. It seems like the tree could stay alive now for a long time, but we should probably monitor and rescan it and see what happens. So key takeaways here, that reactive maintenance costs lives and millions of dollars. And even with a idealized goal of a non-scientifically proven 5 to 7 year cycle, you're still creating backlogs of work that need to happen, and we're still missing inspection and maintenance opportunities. That a proactive inventory and risk management program can flag and prevent tragedy, lawsuits, can improve tree lifespan, and overall improve the KPIs on your urban forest. And by investing in things like a smart tree inventory, and regular inspections, and proactive maintenance programs, then it will save you money and you will have better results. So if we go back to the idea of thinking about, you know, why does your health insurance company not, you know, allow for a free preventative visit every year? It's because they want to save money on the future expenses of a expensive, you know, heart disease issue, weight issue, whatever it is. We need to be thinking the same way by making those regular investments in our preventative maintenance. We can save future expenses for sure. We know that with our training pruning program. Why don't we approach that with our inventories and our mature tree programming? Not to say we shouldn't deal with high risk situations. Of course, you need to triage, you know, when your blood pressure spikes, or when your diabetes is really bad, or you, God forbid, you have cancer or something. You definitely want to deal with that. But all of those scenarios that you treat in that scenario have a follow-up maintenance program with them. So I want to thank you for your time. I think we have about 10 minutes now or so for some questions. Again, you know, the QR code is here for you to download the slideshow. My contact info is there if you have any questions. I want to, you know, acknowledge that we are doing this alongside our partners, Greenhill, and you know, we're really excited to get your feedback on what you think is good, bad, or otherwise, and appreciate all the work that, like Leslie said at the beginning of the time, if you are making decisions about where trees go, where trees get pruned, what trees get removed, don't take that lightly. You're literally saving people's lives. It's the critical, most important thing that we can do. And I greatly appreciate everything you do. So thanks.
Thanks, Josh. Thanks, Josh. This has been great. Thanks so much for recovering after the technical issues and keeping up with us here, because this is really fantastic information and like game changing for urban forestry. And so if you've got questions, please use the question and answer button. I see questions there already, so we'll get to those. I see some in the chat, and then we had some pre-submitted ones as well. And we'll plan to go to the top of the hour, and if you need to drop off, then great. And if Josh, if you have a little time to go past the top of the hour, we'll stay on to wrap up any Q&A if you have time, Josh, and then we'll take it from there. So I think the first question, Josh, I didn't hear you cover it, I don't think, was cost. We got that one submitted. I bet that's on a lot of people's minds. Is probably hard to answer based off people's number of trees, everything. So could you cover that a little bit more for us?
Yeah, no problem at all. I tried to cover it here with costs, so if we look at a smart tree inventory, they usually cost about $3 a year, $6 every 2 years. Versus like a traditional inventory that usually costs, I factored in $7, which is probably on the light end these days, every 5 years. So trying to be very transparent about it, what the costs are. The main difference on the costs is, do you swallow it all? Do you save up and swallow it all at once? Or do you have a more even level budget to it?
Gotcha. Thanks. Starting to look at the questions in the chat from Melissa. For communities that don't currently have a comprehensive or up-to-date tree inventory, would you recommend Smart Inventory as a good tool for establishing a baseline data set? Or is it better suited for maintaining and updating existing inventories? Also, is TreeKeeper 8 required to use this type of inventory?
Great question. So, I think that there are advantages if you have an existing tree inventory already before you jump into a smart tree inventory. Simply from when we're doing species identification, we're doing the cohort analysis, we're doing things like that, the more training data and the more information that we have available to feed into the systems improves it. That being said, there's no reason to wait. That's why I say the future is now. It's hard for me, Leslie, to think about, like right now, like a lot of people, if you say, oh, I don't have an inventory, I'm going to go ahead and do an old school pen and paper one, because, so kind of going backwards and doing, even if you don't have a GIS based inventory right now, to do that feels very old school already to me, to kind of physically walk and look at every single tree. And then the second part of the question is, yeah, you do have to have a TreeKeeper system. I mean, you own your data, but in order to make it usable, to have that viewer and to be able to edit, you need to have a good, stable software for that. If you have the capabilities to have that in some other platform, you could import it and do that. We have yet to see anybody that can do that, but I guess it's possible. You still own the data, but we don't charge anything extra for the TreeKeeper system because it's integral to the delivery of the smart tree inventory.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Going to the Q&As that have been submitted, and Wade, at the beginning of your presentation, I asked, this is interesting. Sarah says the results from that, the study you did was the 311 calls. Are those published somewhere about the study you did about 311 calls and the 80% response?
Yeah, good question. They're not published in any sort of like peer-reviewed journal article, for sure. It's a sort of an applied research project. I don't know if Largo has published it on their website or something like that, but I'm happy to share the information. They've given us permission to share the information, so happy to do that as well.
Okay. What platform are you collecting your LiDAR from? Drone?
These are all ground-based LiDAR units attached to traditional vehicles or like a golf cart setup for parks. So we have 2 Regal sensors that shoot out about 2 million points per second, going at about 1,200 feet. And then we have a Ladybug 360-degree camera collecting information as well.
Okay. Can you discuss the data storage and management needs for this type of LiDAR data? We had a couple about that. City with low data storage capacity, the large data files, anything people need to be aware of?
Fantastic question. And that's why we have our TreeKeeper software with our 3D viewer, is to take that burden off of anybody, because literally every day we're collecting over a terabyte of data, and then we have to clean that and process that. So it's a huge, I can't even stress the petabytes of data that are being moved around to create this elegant, beautiful user and experience where you're able to actually just go to your web Chrome browser and start spinning trees without having to store any data, without having to do any extraction or analysis. I mean, it completely blows my mind that we've lifted that completely off of any client's expectations. So as long as you have internet connection then you can access it. Don't have to worry about storing any.
Okay. Question about the timeline. How long does it take to complete scanning and processing the data?
Good question also. We are constrained on having to do it during leaf-on conditions right now to be able to calculate critical things like leaf area index, to identify the species of the tree, to get good photos. So we just started our scanning season on Monday, actually, down in Dallas this year. So that's super exciting. So we have, them going 7 days a week. And about 4 weeks after the scan, we're able to deliver all of the tree inventory information. So it all comes into the system and you're able to look at all the trees with the base metrics. And about 4 weeks after that, you start getting the advanced metrics like species and, cohort analysis. And that, the beauty of that, Leslie, it doesn't matter the size of the community. It all happens about that. So we can do 20,000 trees in about that time versus 200,000 versus 2 million, kind of the way the pipeline works.
Yeah. Josh, are you able to stay on a few minutes past the top of the hour?
Yeah, I am.
Okay, so we're approaching top of the hour. Carla has just dropped the CEU form in the chat. If you're seeking ISA CEUs, we will submit those on your behalf. We'll keep going for a few minutes after. If you need to drop off, this is being recorded and will be sent to you afterwards. We'll be posting it on our YouTube page. Question about, sometimes when you get to this much amount of data, like it's oh my God, so much data. Look at all the decisions I can make. And oh my God, this is a lot of data. Like, how am I going to process this? How am I going to make really important decisions off of this? Is that something your team helps with? Do people get trained to know what you're clicking all sorts of things really quickly on your example? Like, how are people going to be prepared to really make informed decisions off of this?
One of my mentors had this saying that I've kept ever is, Josh, that's fabulous. That's so much great information. You have to make a decision and take action on it. Right. And I literally keep a Post-it note right here that says that. That drives all of our decision process through this is because we could actually share a lot more information, Leslie, than what we're actually sharing. There's so much available information around it. But if it doesn't provide value yet, and more importantly, we're trying to link everything to scientifically proven value. So working with professors around the world, what does crown ratio mean? How can we do that? For example, dieback. We know that dieback is the #1 single indicator on a tree's future health. And we know that through scientific research. So how to use dieback. But yeah, whenever we deliver a system to a client, we come into their office with them in person, we sit down. Not only do we train them how to use the data, we train them how to make decisions with it off of what we've experienced. But every client and every city is different. You have different KPIs. Maybe you have to think about that for a second and understand your risk tolerance and know what you're looking at to help determine which trees are there that you want to work on. Every tree is flagged for outliers, like I said, on 6 key elements. We envision in the future clients driving that process more to help and determine what analysis they want so they could determine which trees are outliers. so they can go and inspect on them, again, as we learn.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks. Let's see. Again, we're at the top of the hour. If you have joined us today and need to drop off, thank you so much for being with us. We appreciate you as our members and our friends, so thank you for joining us. We'll stay on for a few more minutes, and again, this will be sent to you afterwards. We have a question from Alex. My focus is on improving the survival and growth of newly planted trees first 5 years. Is this type of data high enough resolution to use on such small trees, or are they too small?
It's a great question, Alex. So I'll answer that in two things. Like, definitely the resolution of the LiDAR and the photos is definitely good enough to look at smaller trees. There's a couple issues to think about with it. One is if a tree is completely obstructed for some reason when we're scanning, then we could miss it, right? So think about like if it's only a 10-foot tall or a 15-foot tall tree and it's parked behind a big box truck, we just can't see it, then we could miss it. But we can still, if we can see it, we can measure it. If we can measure it, we can calculate leaf area, we can calculate percent dieback, doesn't matter on the size of the tree. So that's why one of the KPIs we're introducing is percent survivability and better tree selection. I will point out though, one challenge we do have is with newly planted trees under about 6 inches, it is hard to tell the species on those. So a lot of those do get kind of thrown into an unknown, if you will, or get into the genre. If you objectively think about that, it's hard to tell the difference between some maples and some oaks and some other trees as a newly planted tree until they really decide what they're going to be. So no different than for us.
Let's see here. We had a couple of questions about essentially like density of canopy. So does this work for parks or areas that are not accessible via vehicles? And then another one about, I think it was along the same lines of being able to see through dense canopy.
Good question. So, we definitely are focusing on what we would call like the mowed and manicured areas of a park setting. And then ideally a kind of established right-of-way along a street. That being said, we have been doing some inventories that have some heavily wooded areas along streets, especially in like the Northeast. And there is a challenge with those trees. The point cloud does a really good job. We can see the structure of the tree. It's more the species identification that becomes really challenging because the trees are so tall and they're so straight and there's no branching lower. So it becomes harder to kind of see the leaves of the tree and identify the species of it. And so if we think about the iterative spacing of trees in natural areas, the closer it is to the scanner, the better the density is. The farther it gets away, the worse the density becomes, especially when you're thinking about real computational challenging things like leaf area. Our scanners and our processes are good enough that it's not really generally an issue when we're staying within the right-of-way. If you wanted us to look beyond the right-of-way, that could become more of a challenge. It's possible, but it becomes more of a challenge when you start going, 30, 40, 50, 100 feet beyond the right-of-way distances.
I think you're essentially answering another question that someone asked about being able to scan private property trees. So is anyone doing that, or is that? Go ahead.
Yeah, we did a pilot project in Austin with that, where it's not something the city contracted for, but it's something we were interested in looking at. And we have some good results from that, where we looked at front yard trees and side yard trees and backyard trees. The way that we drive and scan, we're going up and down each street multiple times, rounding corners. Of course, if a tree is obstructed by a building or a big privacy fence or a shed, there's challenges there. It's not an aerial version, but we could stitch together. We did this in a golf course in Vegas where it had challenging issues to get on the course while it wasn't playtime. So we did stitch together some drone imagery to capture some of those, farther away. So it's possible. It's not the primary use case that we're trying to solve, though. So it's definitely possible, but we're trying to really solve that right-of-way tree.
Okay. I think I'm understanding Bryce's question. Asked, what parameters are you using to identify the species, knowing that you're only collecting images? I imagine this is like, how are you sure that this is the right species being entered into the inventory information?
Definitely the hardest part of the whole process. And we do a combination of, we stitch the LiDAR point cloud with the photos. Machine learning takes its first guess at what it thinks it is. And then currently right now, we actually do have almost every tree gets evaluated, validated with an arborist looking at it at this time. And that's part of the learning process that we're going through. It's been so amazing to see how fast the machines learn. So, that process will get better and faster. We have with each tree species identification, we do get a confidence rating interval with it. So trees that, which is really sweet about machines, is they don't lie to you, versus like an inventory arborist that's right out of school that's trying to prove that they have a good job. So when we have a confidence rating below 80%, we put extra eyes on it to make sure. So.
Okay. Let's see. Well, I think there's a few more questions here, but we also are 6 minutes after the top of the hour. So I think we should wrap and have people follow up with you afterwards, Josh, if they have any more questions or something specific. Really thank you for your time. Appreciate the great information. This is exciting. I know people are both nervous and excited about what this means for them personally and what it means for their urban forest. So really appreciate you taking the time today. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. We love having you here, and we'll hope to see you next month. Bye, everybody.